This is the council post-meeting conference. We have this news conference following every meeting of the Common Council here in the city of Marshfield. I'm Steve Barg, I'm the City Administrator. And at this point, I will turn over the program to Mike Warren of WDLB as we look back at the April 27th Common Council meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And boy, what a meeting it was. I don't know that I recall an agenda, I guess, as jam-packed as this one was, considering not only the length of the agenda, but just the magnitude of the items that were on there all in one night for council members to consider. And I guess I'll start my line of questioning with the, I don't know, maybe it is the top item going on in the city right now, although there are several of them. The one that kind of stands out above and beyond the others, maybe just a cut above the rest right now, is the issue with the mayor's office and what's happening there. And the council, it's been just over a month since the mayor was removed, and the council now did take a step forward on Tuesday in regards to that office. Maybe just explain what happened on Tuesday and where we're going to from here.
Sure, Mike. At the last meeting on April 13th, I reviewed with the council as an information-only item 3 options for the council to consider. One would be to have a special election for the position of mayor. Another would be to take applications, letters, resumes, those kind of things. Have people come to the meeting, have them come to the podium, make a little presentation and answer questions, and then the council will just literally vote to select the next mayor. They've done that before in my time here with council members on a couple of occasions to fill vacancies. The next one would be to simply have the council president continue until the next regular municipal election in April of 2022, just doing what I call the baseline duties. I guess I kind of made up that term, but running the meetings, signing official documents, just the things that need to be done under state and local law. And then the new one that they introduced back on April 13th was the idea of maybe the council manager form of government, which is employed by about, I guess it's 19 communities across the state of Wisconsin, where I think in most cases the council elects the mayor from its own ranks to run the meetings. But otherwise, it's a situation where the person in my shoes would be a manager and would have more extensive authority, kind of like a CEO, basically. They'd be the chief executive officer of the city. They could hire and fire department heads without council input and those kind of things. So we did walk through it. I think the council seemed to have a heart for 2 of the options, really, to be honest with you, Mike. One being the special election and the other being the council president just continuing for 12 months. And I think ultimately, if you look back at the discussion, I think the real reason that the special election was not pursued was because it couldn't happen until well into the summer, in July, and at a cost to the city of maybe $15,000 or so, because we don't have any other elections to share the fun with in terms of the expense. And I think the council thought about it and thought, well, the people will be filing again by December 1st. If we don't elect a mayor till middle to late summer, I mean, it's really kind of crammed together. So they did ultimately say, let's go with the council president. Nick Paschal was elected council president back on April 20th. So he'll presumably be doing this for 12 months, handling, again, the required duties of the position. And what he does beyond that, I guess, is kind of up to Nick.
And in the meantime, I think, you mentioned the city manager form of government. And I think you were sort of asked to kind of look into that, maybe bring back some information on what these other forms of government might look like here.
Yeah, and I did bring back a little bit of information for the meeting on the 27th, Mike. Again, just the basics of it's under Chapter 64 of Wisconsin statutes. It's, like I said, where the manager is kind of the chief executive officer of the city and has a lot more authority than an administrator has. It kind of lays out what those duties and responsibilities are. But I did make it clear to the council in my memo and in my presentation that if they want to look at that, that's a longer term thing. It requires a charter ordinance to be approved. I don't think there's been a charter ordinance approved since I've been here. There's an opportunity for a referendum by the public. So it's a process when you're looking at modifying a form of government. And so ultimately, the council brought up in discussion that even though they're going ahead with the council president, being the one for the next 12 months to fill in some mayoral duties, They would like a presentation brought forward from a professional through me to analyze the various forms. You have weak mayor, strong mayor, council manager. There's also one called the commission form of government that I don't know how many cities in Wisconsin use anymore, where every individual member of the council would kind of be responsible for overseeing a different area like public works or economic development. So that one hasn't been mentioned in discussion, but it is a form of government that's available for Wisconsin cities and villages, I believe. So I'll get somebody from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities or some other professional organization to come to the council, probably sometime in the summer, Mike, and explain what those various forms of government are, how they work, and what the pros and cons of each ones are.
So when you say council manager, is a manager or like a city manager, is that somebody who's hired, like a city administrator, or is it somebody who's elected from within the council?
No, it's elected by the council. I'm sorry, it's appointed.
Hired.
It's hired by the council.
Okay.
Similar to what they did with me back in 2011. The difference is not that. The difference is the authority that person has. And you know, there's some cities would speak probably, well of it, saying, hey, look, that's great. Get a professional manager in here, give him or her more authority. Others might say, well, that seems a little bit removed from, the access by the people. We'd like to vote for a mayor and be able to work through that person to get change brought about or get some things done that we want to see. So I'm sure there's going to be pros and cons when the discussion comes up. But I get the impression council's at least interested in exploring that. I know that Oshkosh and Eau Claire and other cities that I'm familiar with have the council manager form of government. And we'll see if the council likes what they hear, again, probably sometime in the early to midsummer.
Okay. And that doesn't necessarily do away with the mayor's position then? Those communities still have an elected mayor?
I don't believe so. The communities I'm aware of have an elected council, and then the council itself elects a mayor. So, if we had that system now, we would have voted for Nick or somebody else to be the mayor, but that individual has limited authority. They run the meetings. I imagine they might be the one to sign some of the formal documents, but I don't believe that council manager form of government has an elected mayor. I'd have to look into that farther.
Okay. All right. Anything else on that item?
No, I think they made a wise choice. I think that there's been a lot of, upheaval around here lately, with the whole thing with how many cities can say that they've had a police chief and a mayor leave, within 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it was. That's a lot of change to deal with. And I think the idea of just allowing someone to keep the ship moving forward as best they can at this point without having a lot of fanfare is probably a good idea.
Well, and after 5 elections, last year,
Yeah.
It's probably a good idea too, maybe to let the city clerk's office catch their breath a little bit.
Yeah, and again, this one would have been entirely on us in terms of the cost, whereas other times we can kind of piggyback, if you will, with other entities that are having elections. So we would have borne the brunt of the expense, and again, the person would have only been serving for a limited number of months.
All right. Also on Tuesday, the council did finalize, or I guess sign off on the council president's appointments to various committees, commissions, and boards that were, I guess, announced at the April 20th meeting. And I guess the most notable one there that stood out was the Fire and Police Commission appointments. There were actually 2 positions open, I guess a regular, term that had expired, and then a position created by a resignation,
Correct.
I believe, on that commission. One of those individuals not up for reappointment was actually the subject of another council agenda item from Tuesday, and that was to review this complaint involving 2 fire and police commissioners. Can you maybe just kind of unravel that whole thing for us, how those 2 issues sort of tie together now and where those issues move to here going forward?
Yeah, Mike, I've been here for 10 years now, and normally the appointments are pretty quiet, almost like housekeeping. The mayor makes them one week, and then the council approves them the following week. To our many committees, boards, and commissions, we thank all the people who serve on those bodies. But in this case, with the Fire and Police Commission, there's a lot of spotlight on it right now with what we've been through with the police chief and the mayor and some of the things that have come up publicly. So we did have, as you said, one person was proposed by Tom Witzel to be replaced, or I should say not reappointed, and someone else was being chosen. And then we had a resignation from someone that we need to fill that vacancy. And what happened was we had people come to the podium and suggest that maybe we hit the pause button for a moment and give a little bit more time for reflection and an opportunity to discuss who might those next commission members be. Of course, we're going into selecting a new police chief. That'll be a recruitment going on in the coming months. So, and the council did take those comments to heart. I believe Councilmember Butkey, maybe others brought up, would it be a problem to the operation of the commission if we did hit the pause button for a month or something? Ultimately, I think the council seemed to figure that they had good people to appoint, and they'd like to just keep it moving. Get those people on board, get them part of the commission, and then have them do the work of trying to recruit and hire a new chief of police. So those appointments got way more discussion than they normally do in a typical year for that reason. As far as the complaints that were made against Randy Gershman and Andy Keogh, two of our members of our Fire and Police Commission, the complaints were given to me on April 5th. And I subsequently turned them over to the city attorney very quickly, asked him to review them. And, he did look at them, not for content per se, but for form, to make sure that they've met all the requirements and checked all the boxes for the council to consider them in the same way that the council considered the complaint made against the mayor a couple of months ago. And he found that they did not. There's a couple of minor things that we need to be done for that to move forward. He did communicate that to a member of the group that had filed this complaint, and we're still waiting for a response to that. So as a result of that, the city attorney reported on Tuesday night that the complaints, as we have them against those two individuals, do not meet the form necessary to bring them forward under Chapter 17 of state law. So then the question became, well, what do we do with them? And one of our council members said, well, let's make a motion to dismiss them. And the city attorney said, I don't think you want to do that. You don't have anything that you can legally consider, so how can you dismiss it? So after a lot of discussion, Mike, they kind of agreed. I think, I don't remember how the motion read, but basically just to allow them, there's no action taken at all. Nothing's happening. As we sit here, you and I doing this right now, it's possible that somebody from that group or the individual that the city attorney had talked with will come back and have the complaint redrafted in a way that meets that requirement. If they do, then it'll likely be before the council again. That matter will likely be on another agenda. If it never happens, then that's perhaps going to be the last we hear of it. So one of the two members, Randy Gershman, has now been replaced by Tom Witzel, the outgoing council president. Bill Penker is taking that spot. And the other one, Andy Keogh, is still on the commission. His term is not up. I'm not sure what date his term ends, but he's still a member of the commission. So that will just continue until anything might happen to change down the road.
Yeah, his term expires now 2025.
Okay.
Because he was just reappointed last year. Yeah. As you said, Randy Gershman, his term was up and he, didn't get renominated for the commission. So I guess that complaint now, you mentioned the motion, it was an interesting motion, a motion to take no action.
Yeah.
Basically due to lack of authority, since it wasn't verified, the city attorney was basically saying, even if you wanted to, you couldn't do anything with this complaint because it's not verified. And because one of the targets of the complaint is no longer on the Fire and Police Commission, does this complaint, in fact, sort of just automatically become null and void simply because one of the persons named in the complaint is no longer serving on the commission?
Well, I was the one who received the complaints when they were brought to the City Hall, and they were both made, they're made individually, one to Randy Gershman, one against Andy Keogh, and they both very specifically requested removal of the individual from the Fire and Police Commission. They didn't ask for anything else. So you're right, as a result of the fact that Randy Gershman is no longer a member of the commission, it would be presumed that one goes away. I mean, they raised some concerns about some things involving him, but their request was that he not be a member, and he no longer is, as you and I have this conversation. So it would seem that the only complaint that's active, and again, it won't be fully active unless it's brought back in the proper form, would be the one involving Mr. Keough.
Okay. So those were separate complaints. They were not the subject of one complaint.
Correct.
It was
They were
one against
totally
Randy Gershman and one against Andy Keough.
Correct. They were
Oh.
totally separate complaints.
Okay.
There may have been concerns raised in the two of them that were overlapping, but they were very separate documents.
Okay. And again, so we're just waiting to see what this citizens group decides?
Well, I guess so. I mean, I didn't get the impression from the city attorney that there's a deadline.
Right.
That if they don't get back to him by May 15th or some other date that these go away, I think they can always bring them back in the proper format with the correct verification that's needed under Chapter 17. It's been 3 weeks now. I guess it's in their hands whether they want to take that next step. Otherwise, we'll go forward the way we are. Randy's no longer a member, and Andy will continue to be a member of that body.
Okay. And there is another complaint, speaking of, while we're on the subject, it wasn't a council agenda item on Tuesday, but it is something that's sort of out there. This other complaint, I believe there were complaints against the fire and police commissioners. And isn't there another complaint that has to do with 7, I believe, members of the Common Council?
There is, yeah. That was filed on the same day, I understand, April 5th. That's not a document that was given to me. That was delivered directly to the acting police chief, Pat Zepps, who subsequently turned it over to another law enforcement agency to investigate. The request was not for their termination from the council. The request, as I've heard, was for an investigation into possible inappropriate action on their part, which I presume, if determined to be correct, could lead to that conversation of being removed from the council. But, certainly the Marshfield Police Department is not going to be investigating complaints against the council. That's not going to happen. So very similar to what happened with Mayor McManus last year. It's in the hands of a law enforcement official with another agency, a nearby county. And they're looking right now as we speak into whether or not the allegations of wrongdoing are founded. I don't know how long it'll take. I've had people say, well, is this going to take 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 10 weeks? It's really not our call. And truthfully, to be honest with you, I don't really know anything about it. I don't know more about it than anybody else. I know it was on one of the Wausau TV channels, right when it broke, they had referenced 3 issues that were apparently noticed in the complaint. Things regarding unlawfully usurping the mayor's authority, open meetings violations, and possible violations of electronic records management. I think I'm doing this from memory. But again, that's not a complaint that was given to me or anyone here at City Hall, and it's really not in my hands what happens to it.
Okay. All right, so that's just, I guess, being investigated now by, we don't know, do we know who?
Yeah, it's a nearby, I'll just say it's a nearby law enforcement agency.
Okay. And speaking of, you mentioned that complaint was given to Pat Zepps. He is the acting police chief.
Yes.
Any idea or any update on that process? People are always sort of wondering, again, not a council agenda item the other night as we sit here and review the council meeting, but as these things come up, I think, well, maybe people just generally interested. Any idea or word on where the process is at now in terms of the police chief position in the city?
Well, the Police and Fire Commission had a discussion about this at their last meeting, which was probably 2 weeks ago, back in mid-April. And they talked about the process. Now, some people might be saying, wait a minute, the separation agreement with, former Chief Gramza was signed back on, the 4th of March or something like that. How can we be just starting this? And I think part of the deal is that the commission is, realizing that things have kind of settled down for the moment, and that's not a bad thing to allow things to settle. They are serious about ramping up a recruitment process. At their last meeting, they did have Jennifer Rayque, our human resources director here at the city, walk through some things with them in terms of what a search process could look like. One of the topics that came up is, would it be done internally with presumably her as a key player, or would we farm it out to a recruitment entity? There's companies that recruit professionals for positions like these. I don't remember that the commission even made a determination at that time, but one of the things that they did discuss too is how broad the search process would go. And I weighed in on that, and I think I may have said this the last time we met here for a post-council meeting news conference. I would like to see them have a fairly robust search process, and looking, maybe pretty far and pretty wide. And if they come to the conclusion that the best person is someone currently in the Marshfield Police Department, great. But I think at this moment in time, with what we've been through, that a fairly significant search process would be a good thing for all involved, no matter how it turns out and who's ultimately hired. So I would expect, Mike, that this is going to take a period of several months. People need to know at home that the police services are being provided normally, that Assistant or Acting Chief Zeps is doing a wonderful job. People are just, doing their work faithfully as we have this conversation. But it's not like we're trying to stall to get a new leader, but I think they want to, this is somebody that they'll hope will be the leader for a long time to come. I think they want to do a pretty thoughtful process, and I would applaud them for that.
Okay. Also, going back to the council agenda now, one of the other big items on this agenda was and is for a number of, school boards are tackling this issue, a number of councils, are dealing with this issue of mask requirements, and discuss lifting mask requirement for certain city buildings and facilities was on the agenda. Maybe just recap that one and where that issue is at now for not only City Hall, but what are the other facilities? Because there's some, I guess, maybe confusion about, how broad, how far reaching this is. Some facilities are still going to be under mask requirements, some are not. Can you just kind of clarify that issue now after Tuesday night?
Sure, Mike. Under the government form that we have here in the laws of the state of Wisconsin, there are entities, or I shouldn't say entities, but there are boards and commissions that have real control over the operations of their departments or functions. Here in Marshfield, we have the Marshfield Utilities Commission that oversees and governs the operation of utilities, the electric and water utility. We have the Police and Fire Commission that oversees and supervises their operations. And we also have the Library Board, same thing. They're the ones that Jill Porter, the library director, reports to. So those facilities, the police station, the fire station, the library, and the utilities building are not part of this mix. Those bodies need to determine for themselves whether they want to require masks or not. So this would be for everything else, whether it be City Hall, the Second Street Community Center, wastewater streets, some of those other buildings. I brought to the council 2 weeks ago the fact that, again, with the state Supreme Court having struck down the governor's mask mandate, that, everybody, businesses, churches, governments, everybody is trying to figure out what to do. What's their place in this? So I had suggested back then that, Wausau, Point, and Rapids were very clear with me when I called them on the phone 2.5 weeks ago, whenever it was. And they said, no, not only are we not lifting our mask requirement for city facilities, we're not even talking about it. We're just continuing as normal because we feel like we're still in this pandemic in a way that we don't want to back off and take our foot off the gas pedal. But I did find other cities that were saying, look, let's pick a date, maybe 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out, whatever, when people who want to get a vaccine have had the opportunity, and let's then say that after that date, we're not requiring masks. And, if you didn't get the vaccine, maybe you're not quite as concerned about it. So I brought to the council the idea of using May 17th as the date, exactly 6 weeks past the April 5th date, when the state said that anybody 16 and over, regardless of any health conditions, could get the vaccine. And I was blown away. Well, first of all, the council voted 5-5 tie on the idea of using May 17th. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's going to die and we'll just keep the mask requirement, indefinitely for now. But then a motion was made, I think it might've been by Adam Fisher, to say, no, let's end it immediately. And that was approved 7-3. So surprising to me, they did vote on Tuesday night to get rid of the mask requirement for cities and buildings and facilities that we control immediately. So the next morning here at City Hall, the signs came off, it all in a blink of an eye went back to pre-COVID. Now, when I say this, keep in mind that If cases spike, if conditions warrant, we can always look at doing it again. But with the number of people getting vaccinated and the cases still being, I mean, they've gone up a little, but certainly way below where they were back in the winter, that maybe we'll be pulling out of the pandemic sometime soon.
Yeah, and that council vote right in line with what you heard from city employees.
Yeah, I was asked as part of the April 13th meeting to survey employees, and I got tremendous response from the employees, and at least 90% were supportive of getting rid of it now. In fact, I made a joke from the podium that, they wanted it done yesterday. I think part of that is many of them have gotten vaccinated, which is wonderful. And I think beyond that, I mean, it's been a long last year, it's been a long 12 months. People are worn out. And I think they feel like, we need to take personal protections for ourselves. If you don't get vaccinated, keep wearing the mask. We have people right now in this building, Mike, that are still wearing masks. And I'm supporting them, we're all supporting them 100%. But that it was time to move forward. And, either you're getting or have gotten the vaccine, or you're going to keep wearing a mask, but we shouldn't require all visitors and employees to do so.
Do you know what is the percentage of city employees who've gotten vaccinated?
I don't, and actually it was suggested to me by a department head that maybe I find that out before Tuesday's meeting to report that. But, I was talking a little bit with our human resources director, and we kind of thought maybe that's a question we didn't want to be asking. I get the impression, Mike, that a growing number, I mean, is it 50%? Is it some other number? I don't know. But I mean, I hear fairly regularly that people are getting vaccines. And so we're definitely going to the point where more and more people are vaccinated. And like I said, there's still people wearing masks in this building. And again, it's not telling people that they can't. It's just saying that they don't have to anymore.
Okay. Yeah, and the other interesting part about that vote, the first vote on Tuesday was, here we have a tie vote and we have no mayor to break the tie.
Yeah.
Normally you'd have a mayor to break that tie, and interesting to see which way that would have gone, but we didn't have that. So we had to basically, a 5-5 tie now means it dies instead of getting a tie-breaking vote from somebody.
Yeah, that's interesting that you noticed that because, we talk about how the mayor in this form of government doesn't have a lot of formal powers. He runs the meetings, he or she, and, signs official documents. But, and veto, you can veto something and make the council override you with a 2/3 vote. But breaking ties is something that comes up, I don't know, it seems to come up a couple times a year. And this would have been a big one, the requirement of wearing masks in our city facilities. And we all looked around and said, well, what happens? And the city clerk, Deb Hall, said, it fails 5-5. Whereas if there's still been a mayor, he would have had the opportunity to break that tie.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting vote. Okay, anything else on that?
Yeah, I just want to say that I want people who are tuned into us right now, Mike, not to think that we're backing off on public safety. We're certainly encouraging people here to use proper hygiene and to take care of themselves. And we're doing a lot of cleaning of facilities and rooms that are used. So I think just like every other business and everyone else in town, we're just trying to find that point where we start moving forward. And I think the council decided maybe we're there already.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Also, there was a closed session item on Tuesday, and let's see here, litigation involving personal property tax claim. There was, looked like it was an 8-0 vote. 10 went in and 8 came out. I don't know what happened there, but I think I know why. Maybe 1 didn't hang around to vote. It would have been an abstention anyway. And maybe that had to do with another member of the council too. I'm not sure, but maybe just to talk about the closed session item, what the vote was, what the council voted on, or what was the outcome of that closed session.
Sure, Mike. Yeah, you're right about the reason why the one person left, because that individual works for the clinic health system, and that's who the party involved is. The clinic had been asking for personal property tax relief, believing that they were being required to pay personal property tax on items that are now exempt according to the state law. And so we've been dealing with this for a while. And you may recall 2 weeks ago, we came out in open session and took a vote to approve a settlement agreement with them. But if you remember, or if you saw the copy of the minutes, that was subject to one more review by the city attorney. And in reviewing the issue, the city attorney talked to the city assessor, did some more investigation, and had a couple concerns that he wanted brought forward. So what happened was he came to the council the other night in closed session and had some changes to recommend to one paragraph of the agreement. Basically, what it means going forward. What's the starting point for next year? Can the city revisit some of the concerns that we had with what items were exempted? Or how does that all work? So he suggested some changes, and the council came out into open session and unanimously voted to approve the agreement with the modifications that the city attorney made to that one paragraph. And again, the settlement agreement as a whole was not in doubt. It was not being debated. It was really this issue about the impact going forward on future appeals that might be made by the clinic, and whether or not, the city could challenge them and on what basis we would be looking at those kind of conversations. But all in all, I think it's thought that the agreement is best for us. It's a compromise that seems reasonable. And this all ties back to the 2018 law that the state passed, largely exempting machinery and tools, from personal property tax. And then the question became, in this dialogue, what constitutes machinery and tools? But I think we've worked through a lot of that element.
Okay. Also, I just want to highlight one other agenda item there was, and I think this has become an annual agenda item, and it was presentation by Nick Cum, Marshfield Utilities Manager, value of the utility. Because it's also an interesting report because Marshfield is unique in that, we have this city-owned utility. And so maybe can you kind of recap that presentation? What did Alderman hear? What is the value of the utility, at least as it stands now, or as it stood in the the presentation the other night?
Well, first of all, Mike, I'd say that some people wonder why it seems like they're not part of us, or they are part of us, or what's the deal, right? They are under the city's umbrella. There is no separate legal entity called Marshfield Utilities. They operate the electric and water under the auspices of the city. So the commission has a lot of authority, but they're still under our umbrella. So what they wanted to do the other night is give an update, talk about their last 12 months of operations, and really let people know what they do for the city that's beneficial. Now, the first thing they do is trying to keep rates reasonable. And I think that they reiterated again that we have some of the lowest electric rates in the state. That's good for business. It's also good for residential customers, that we're paying less for electric than many parts of Wisconsin. But the other thing they wanted to talk about is what else they do for the community projects that they've been involved in. And you saw, if you noticed, that they were walking around the zoo a lot. The people who were talking for the commission. Well, they've helped on projects in the zoo. They've helped on projects in the community. They've been part of other improvements across town. And they want it understood that when they can, that they are a player in that. They also want it known that they provide a lot of money to the city through the pilot payment and through a dividend. Between the pilot and the dividend combined, they pay $2.2 million to the city. Now, the pilot payment of almost $2 million is something they're required to pay. It's a payment in lieu of taxes, sort of representing what they would pay if they were a tax-paying entity. But the $230,000 or so dividend is something that they're not required to pay. They do it to try and help further economic development in the city. And the Economic Development Board oversees those monies for the most part and does a lot of good things with them. So they want it known that they're a community player, that they're way more than just, I turn on the lights or I turn on the water faucet, that they do a lot more for the city and that they take pride in that. And I think that's well respected. This year they did it as a video instead of a podium presentation. But I think it's good that they let people know, both here at the council level and in the community, what they do.
Yeah, and they have I guess it's a building and expansion project that's started on the drawing board? I don't know where they're building, they're revamping or adding on to their headquarters. And any update? Did the video contain any update on that?
I don't remember if they specifically addressed it in the video. I do know this. Some people don't, when they hear consolidating operations, they don't know what that even means. Because many people don't recognize on the south end of Oak, I say south end, but down around the area of Castle Rock, a veterinary clinic, that area, that they have a water building that they have, and they have employees and equipment. They've wanted to consolidate those operations into one place for a long time. Yeah. So this is going to be a big new building. It's going to, I think we've talked about before, be maybe $17 million roughly in value. And it'll make them a lot more effective and efficient in what they do. And if you remember, when we first started talking about this, well, I say first, it's been around since before I got here. But would it be able to be worked with Vandehey Waters Aquatic Center in a way that they didn't encroach upon one another? And at one point it was thought, Mike, that the building might be so close that the people at the aquatic center might think, oh my gosh, I really feel imposed upon by this big building. And, but they worked it out. They worked some things out to provide a decent buffer, and they can both, do their projects. I think that the timeline initially was supposed to be to have this building completed in 2022. I don't know what month they're expecting it to be done, but it may be well into 2022 because it's a very ambitious project. But it'll be interesting because now we have Vandehey Waters opening in July of this year, early July. And then next year, we'll see the opening of a very substantial new building right next to it for the electric and water provider. And so, I mean, they're excited about it. And as far as I know, it's still moving forward very well.
And Justin Kasperson, the Parks and Recreation Director, on Tuesday night, too, also gave a brief update on Vandehey Waters. What did you hear there? Anything? I mean, where is that project at? And what is the target date? Yeah, it's still moving toward an opening sometime in early July, hopefully as close to July 1st as possible. And I'm sure there's people hearing us right now, Mike, saying, come on, what about mid-June? It's going to be warm summer weather. They're doing it as fast as they can, but there's a lot of work out there. I trust people have driven by and seen, the size and scope of this improvement. But I got to tell you, when they have that opening in early July and people see what this is with the water features, the water slides and all this, they're just going to be so excited. And this community really needs this, quite frankly. I'm going to be honest and direct with you. With all we've been through, not just the issues with the police chief and the mayor and some of these internal issues, but COVID-19, the impact on restaurants and businesses and people in general. It's been a tough year for many people. To celebrate a beautiful aquatic center is going to be huge. Anything else from the meeting? I guess those are all the highlights, and there were a lot of them. Any other issues that the council dealt with on Tuesday that we should know about?
I don't think so, Mike. They're about to go into their capital improvement program season, and they'll be having 2 special meetings in May on Thursday nights to go over the 5-year blueprint for borrowing and spending on capital and major projects. And that'll be something I think our citizens should keep an eye on because, it's not a firm document. It flows and ebbs from time to time. But that's really where we're talking about trying to do major street work and get some other stuff done with buildings and facilities. And if you're interested in seeing if your street is going to be redone and you want to see some improvements, keep an eye on that. That's where we decide how much we can spend and how much we can borrow and the degree to what we can get work done. So it wasn't talked about the other night, but expect to hear some comments about it in the weeks ahead.
And are there any, I'm just trying to remember, I don't know that there are major, what we would call a major street reconstruction project scheduled for this summer?
No, there really isn't. The next big one is 17th over by the fairgrounds. And there's a lot of work being done on that right now, design work and planning, but that'll be an early 2022 improvement. And, I think we kind of staggered it. Part of it is we're borrowing a lot of money right now to do our part of Vandehey Waters. Again, I want to thank everybody who's donated. The public support for that project, as it's been for so many projects since I've been here, library, community center, other things, projects in the zoo, the public support has been amazing. But, it's a year when perhaps we, decided not to do a major street project. We had talked about doing 17th at one point, but then our borrowing limit kept us from going into that territory.
Okay. That's all I had, Steve. Anything else?
No, I think not. It's good to talk to you as always. It's nice to have Nick Paschal as our council president now in a way that there's some certainty going forward. And we'll look forward to hopefully doing some positive things in the weeks and months ahead.
All right. Thank you.
And that concludes this post-council meeting news conference from the council meeting on Tuesday, April 27th. I want to thank Mike Warren of WDLB as always. And thank you for watching. And we'll see you next time on our post-council news conference.